This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Aang Lakey. She is a distinguished leader with over 20 years of experience of leadership development, violence prevention, and diversity and inclusion, honed through extensive experience in the U.S. Army and federal government. Aang excels in guiding leaders to integrate consciousness and emotional intelligence into their practices, emphasizing the critical importance of intentionality and reflexivity in leadership. Aang has advised leaders at various levels, helping them understand the profound impact their actions and behaviors have on organizational culture. Aang's approach is deeply rooted in the belief that effective leadership is built on a foundation of self-awareness, empathy, and a commitment to aligning actions with values. Aang's work is particularly focused on helping leaders navigate the complexities of diversity, inclusion, and violence prevention, ensuring that these essential issues are addressed with both sensitivity and effectiveness. Aang's personal journey is a powerful testament to their commitment to this work, having overcome significant socialization and unconscious bias from their upbringing in a challenging environment. Aang brings a relatable and authentic perspective to their teachings. They are passionate about helping others confront and overcome similar challenges, advocating for the practical application of leadership principles and appropriate accountability within organizations. So, Aang, welcome to the program. It is great to have you on today.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here and to chat with you today.
Well, let's just jump in with a little bit of context. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and kind of some of those early experiences and how that's kind of influenced where you are today.
Yeah, of course. I always love when the first question is, tell me where you grew up.
Yeah.
So for me, I think most people who've heard my story, that it's one of their favorite things they like to go to. And for me, I grew up in Southeast Texas, which was really ignorant environment in terms of what people believed and how they treated other people in the world. And, of course, growing up in that environment, I didn't realize that that was the circumstance until I decided to move to Vermont for my undergraduate work. And, moving to Vermont, I had quite a bit of exploration, exposure to different cultures and different people and different thoughts, and learned just how much I did not understand about the world. And so, yeah, I think, of course, in the work that I do, it's always been such a big part of my identity and my desire to bring that into my work. And also, I think to help people to understand just how impactful some of those early moments and beliefs that we hold from our childhood can impact us in our leadership style. And
And
so,
when you discover that, as you said, as an undergraduate college student, was it, I'm interested as to your reaction to it, like your eyes were open. Did you resist it? Did you think this is BS? Did you think, oh, this is a whole new world, I'm excited about it? What was your response to seeing things said and done and acted on so differently?
yeah, and I'm so glad you asked me this question, because it is such a struggle to let go of some of those things that we really hold on tight to from our socialization. And I was so lucky to have sociology as a big part of my undergraduate work. So I had to take several sociology classes, which I also was very lucky to have a professor who was so understanding And, I ran into her a few years back, and I will never forget how uncomfortable I felt knowing that she knew how ignorant I was, and like the drastic difference between the person that I am now and the person that I was then. And it really, it took me back to that moment. And I just, it's even in my body now, like I can feel those emotions coming up about someone knowing that part of me, and it's so
Yeah.
interesting. But I was so lucky, I think, to have her as a professor. And she was so kind and so compassionate in the way that she would hear my side of the story and also say, have you considered this, or what about this, and to really be able to hold my hand and to guide me in some of those really tough conversations, because I definitely needed it.
It's in doing some research for this talk today. I mean, your background is, as you said, challenging and tough. When you were a child, I mean, you said that you grew up in extreme poverty. I think both of your parents were incarcerated at one time. Your mother went through breast cancer. I mean, these are just things that a lot of people don't come out of,
Mhm.
in a way that you're describing here, where you've kind of grown, from not having a lot of knowledge on worldly things to now understanding a lot of worldly things. So I'm just curious, as when you think back on that, why do you think you were different in the sense that you grew in the way that you have?
Yeah. It's so interesting. I'm going to reference my same professor again, because she was so influential in my life. And she helped me work through this myself and helped me to understand. And I'll share this example knowing that the conversation that I had with her was specifically related to how and why was I able to navigate this so much better than my siblings. I have four other siblings, all of whom are not in not as lucky, I'll say, as I am in their life. And she helped me to understand the impact of the people that I had in my life, in terms of my mentors, my coaches, and other people who took an interest and who supported me and helped me to grow into the person that I am. And it sounds like you've done a little digging into my background, so you probably know, like, my aunt played a really big role in that. She adopted me when my mother and father were incarcerated, and I had learned so much in just being in a family unit outside of that environment. And I had an army instructor who was also really influential in my process. I had, so many people. And so I think, the best way for me to answer that is I was lucky enough to have people who took an interest and who believed in me. And you probably know this already, but it's now something that I wholeheartedly believe in. And I do everything that I can to support the people in my life. And also, every time new people come into my life, to do everything that I can to show them that I believe in them and that I want to see them succeed, because I know how important it is for people.
So what was it about your aunt that you think was maybe different than what your parents were able to offer you? What did she see in you and do that helped you so much in that time?
Yeah. I think there are probably two really big areas that my aunt helped me with. Well, probably three. One is financial stability. I'd never had financial stability in terms of housing and electricity and the ability to buy things. And my first entry point into being able to buy things that you need without having to think about it. And I still have weird dynamics when it comes to spending money and the way that I look at that in terms of, do I actually need this and is it worth the money that I want to spend on it? And so I think financial stability was a really big component of that. Another key area is she was a police officer and she had done a lot of anti-racism work in her professional world and a lot of feminist work as well. And so that was really my first interactions and understanding of what racism was and what feminism was and how to kind of understand that and also how to be an advocate as a person of privilege. And so I really, really appreciated that about my aunt. And still to this day, there's so many stories about what she taught me and how she taught me just by being who she was.
Yeah. And how
And
long were you with her? From age what to what?
yeah, so I mean, she adopted me around 17 years old. And the last thing that I'll say as part of that other component of what she did for me was she also motivated me to go to college, and not just to go to college, but to go out of the state. And so to get as far away from my family as possible, which was the best guidance that I've ever gotten from anyone, is to like find my own path.
So you
And
went so you went to college in Vermont, as you said, first before you went into the military, is that right?
yeah, so I actually went to a military school in Vermont. And
Okay.
so I was at a military school there and contracted is what we call it, but I became an officer once I graduated.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's just yeah, so now you're in Vermont and you're going to this military school and so um what did you decide to do then after that? Did you just see a career in the military then? That was your goal?
I honestly, I always thought when I was a young adult that I would be in the military
Yeah.
for forever.
Yeah.
Mostly because I didn't believe that I could do anything else. And I also believed that if I had a job with a stable income that allowed me to have housing, to have a car, and to take care of my daily needs, like why would I give that up? And so like there was this weird financial aspect of it, and then also a weird belief that I didn't really believe that I could do other things. And so yeah, I was in the military, and my overall, I was in the National Guard for 15 years. But a big part of my service, I served concurrently as a civil servant. And so after some of the big military deployments that the Vermont National Guard had, I ended up becoming a civil servant, and that started my journey as a government employee. And I did that concurrently while I served in the National Guard. And so, yeah, it was an interesting, I think, transition. But as I grew into myself, mostly in graduate school, I really began to understand that the military was not a good environment for me. It was not the best fit for me after learning a lot of the things that I had grappled with in my undergraduate and as I started my first graduate program. And so, like, even though I always believed as a young person that I would be in the military for as long as I could, I took my first opportunity to exit the military as soon as I could because after doing that inner work, I realized that it was not in alignment with who I wanted to be.
Okay. And you've also done some, you've been a social worker, you've focused on violence prevention. So tell us a little bit about that part of your life, and now you've worked into coaching. So tell us how one led to the other.
Yeah, sorry about the background noise.
I don't hear anything, so it's fine.
Oh, good, good, good. Yeah, I started in violence prevention, and I, I don't know how I ended up in this position. I never considered it as a career. I actually did some volunteer work for a local women's shelter when I was in undergrad, and I supported survivors of sexual and domestic violence. And as part of that, the Army was like, "Oh, you have experience doing this. You should sign up and do our victim advocacy program here." And I was like, "Sure, why not? I'll do it." And somehow that kind of turned into me stepping into this role as a sexual assault response coordinator when the Army was just starting to develop its program. And I don't know how much you know about this, but at the time, the Congress was being slammed, the military services was being slammed about the way that they were treating survivors of sexual trauma. And so, like, the timing all just kind of worked out in terms of, my background and my experience as a volunteer leading me into that position as I was getting my first master's degree in social work. And yeah, so I managed a couple of different programs doing sexual trauma work for the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and then the Coast Guard. And a big part of that was actually advising leadership teams on how to interact with survivors of trauma, how to support them, and also how to prevent violence from occurring within their organizations. And that for me was something that I really enjoyed, the interaction with the leadership teams, helping them in the ways that they wanted or needed to have advice and guidance. And that actually led me to my second master's degree, which was in human relations and organization development. And it helped me to really understand the overall context that leaders have to kind of put themselves in and work in. And yeah, after that, then I was like, I really love doing this. I want to do this more. And so I got into coaching. And then from there, I realized that the things that I wanted to talk about and share with leadership teams were not being talked about in terms of how to integrate equity into the process, how to integrate consciousness into that process, and how all of these areas of consciousness, mindfulness, emotional intelligence, diversity and inclusion, all of these things are all intertwined in the leadership process, and all like foundational work for preventing violence. And so, even now when I think about what I'm doing and how I'm doing in the world, to me, it seems like I'm still on the same path and I'm still doing violence prevention work, just doing it in a little bit of a different way.
So this may be a loaded question, but are the armed services better at dealing with the violence prevention, as you mentioned, than when you started working with them? I mean,
Um,
are we making progress in that area?
Yeah, it is definitely a loaded question. And I will say that there are so many passionate and dedicated people who worked for the armed services supporting survivors. And I think the biggest barrier to survivors in the armed services is the leadership.
Yeah.
And part of the work that I do with leadership teams is helping them to understand the dynamic and the impact that they have on this process. And so it's leadership, it's also the legal process as well. A lot of legal challenges in terms of survivors and their expectations around what can happen and what will happen and those kinds of things. But leadership, I think, plays such a crucial role in helping them to understand what is possible, what is not possible, and what is within the confines of their abilities when it comes to navigating those circumstances. But yeah, I will say it is still really tough to find yourself in that circumstance in the armed services. But thankfully, there are people there who can support individuals and who can help them to make the decisions that are best for them.
Do you think that if we're talking about leadership in that way, and there's some leaders that are going to embrace it and work towards improving it, and there's others that are going to resist it. Is it is it specific to the armed services anyway? Is it a fear that that's going to weaken, um, the the organization to do what its mission is, or do you think it has more to do with just ignorance and prejudice and bias and being non-aware? I mean, why do some embrace it and some don't?
Yeah. This is such an interesting question because, and maybe I am a little biased in my response, at least my first response here, and that is that I do think that the vast majority of leaders care and they want to do the right thing. I think kind of where they fail is either those unconscious biases that they have, the beliefs that they hold to be true, or their just general ignorance when it comes to understanding some of the dynamics impacts them from fully supporting individuals in the way that they need to be supported and from holding offenders appropriately accountable as well. And, I say that because I have worked behind the scenes, closed doors, confidentially with so many leaders. And probably one of the hardest things that I had to do was to listen to some of the really ignorant things that they say, not intentionally, but just they didn't understand well enough to be able to make the best decisions possible. And so I think that is why I am so passionate about providing education and providing like practical application and coaching for leaders in this regard. And a really, really quick example of this, and I'll never forget this person, so dear to my heart, full bird colonel, older gentleman. He'd been in the Army his entire career, and he and I fought so much. And he didn't believe that sexism existed in society, and it didn't exist in the military to him until he had his own experience with his daughters. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but one of my favorite stories is his transition from awakening and understanding that sexism does actually exist, and in order to be an advocate and to be an ally, you have to believe that to be true. And his story with his daughters were the thing that changed his mind and changed his perspective. And that one shift in his like mental psyche was able to help him to become a much better advocate and a much better leader in the organization that he was in. And I saw so much in him change just from that single moment.
Yeah.
And so I think probably the biggest barrier is their own understanding. And I think last thing I'll say about this too is especially when leaders are at a certain level, they've been doing it for, decades. They think they know everything they need to know. And I think that across the board is the biggest mistake that leaders can make. And no one knows everything, and no one can respond to every circumstance and every dynamic perfectly. And that's why we have advisory teams and why we have other people around us. And so I'll pause there.
No, that's a really good point, and it just also the lifelong learning mentality. That there's always something new to learn, and there's always something a different way to look at things and consider it. So yeah, I think you're in trouble if you think that uh, I know everything I need to know. Now I'm good. I think that's a recipe for disaster for sure. So into the corporate world now, you're working with a lot of companies and a lot of people, and diversity, equity, and inclusion has kind of taken a big hit lately. I mean, all of a sudden, everyone kind of thought we were moving in the direction that was good. And now all of a sudden, it's okay to question it, and maybe get rid of some of the things that were done in the past. What's your opinion on that? Is it did companies take it too far and make it not work in the workplace, or are we just kind of going back to the old ways because some people want to?
Yeah. Boys is a tough one right now.
I know it is.
Uh,
And I don't want to make it political. It's not political. It's just, the way with we
yeah.
this,
Yeah. No, I totally understand. And my belief on this is that there are many organizations who did amazing things and many organizations who provided, for lack of a better word, lip service and or metrics for the wrong things.
Mhm.
And I will say that I wholeheartedly support diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging initiatives in all of its forms. And I think when you educate people on these concepts, you can never be wrong in that regard, because even in the United States and even in particular cities, there is so much diversity in terms of different people, different cultures, different personalities. And to think that that is not going to ever come into the workplace, I don't think is the right approach. And so I think the more that we can help our teams and specifically our leadership teams understand how intersectionality plays a role in our interpersonal dynamics, the better off organizations are going to be. And I also believe that in terms of equity, so many people in American culture have been marginalized and continue to be marginalized. And there has to be a balance in terms of helping people who are just like I was, who didn't know any better, to understand the implications of their actions and their decisions on the larger picture. And again, without judgment of those people and those individuals for not knowing and understanding. But I think when we take away the mechanisms that hold leaders accountable, there's a problem with that. And I think it's important to have measures that hold leaders accountable to some of those things. And yeah, maybe I'll pause there and see what you
Yeah.
think about
Well,
that.
it's just really interesting. A lot of things come to mind, and as leaders running groups of people and teams and whatever, I mean, the more aware you can be of people's situations and who they are personally and how they interact with each other. I mean, the better you understand that, the better the team's going to perform. You know,
Yeah.
I think we all
Eh,
know, the gender dynamics in the workplace are, you know, there's as you said, unconscious biases, there's
mhm.
misunderstanding, there's not really getting it or understanding that these issues are there. And they can affect performance, I would think.
Yeah. And I think too, what's really important for people to understand with this is, yes, there are big issues like race and gender and other things that come into play, but remembering that intersectionality or the differing identities that people have and how they impact us. And so, example, if I am a single parent and I am navigating all of the things that being a single parent entails. And then I also have a parent who's going through some sort of health crisis. Like those two different identities are going to overlap and they're going to impact me in the workplace. And so I'm not going to be able to show up to work every day and focus on a specific deadline or a specific task if I'm worried about how I'm going to pick up my kids in 10 minutes when this meeting is supposed to go for another 30 minutes, or how I'm going to get my parents to the doctor's appointments that they need to get to. Like, it's an understanding that everyone's unique identities are always going to play a role in their life and in their dynamics. And understanding that as a leader is going to help them to be able to respond more appropriately, to make better decisions about how they're setting things up and how they're navigating the dynamics that exist and those kinds of things. And so while there are really big topics that, yes, are very important, there's also, other aspects of what we mean when we talk about differing identities and how they impact us in the workplace. And I think that's so important for people to understand, and also how those unique identities kind of compound on each other, and how those compounded identities are going to make our interpersonal dynamics that much more complex.
Yeah. You referenced it earlier, and it may be a lot of what you just said, but how would you define consciousness in leadership?
Yeah. I really like a very simple definition of consciousness. And when I talk about consciousness, I say that it is about awareness of ourselves as leaders. What kinds of biases do we have? What kinds of beliefs do we have? And how does that impact us? And then it's an awareness of others. So that social intelligence component of how do all of my beliefs and my unconscious bias impact my interpersonal dynamics that I have with others? And how does that impact my leadership style? And then the final component is so myself, others, and then the larger systemic structure. And I usually refer to it more in the social sphere instead of the systemic. But systemic is the kind of language that is in the research. And so when we talk about the social sphere, it's a much more broader, complex systems. And so the communities, the environments, the socialization, nationalities, those kinds of things, all of those like big picture things. And so very, very simple awareness of ourselves, awareness of others, and then how we're all interconnected to be a part of this larger system.
So, what do you counsel the people that you work with or leaders what would advice be from you if a leader makes a gaffe, and it may not be because of prejudice or inflexibility, maybe just not understanding or not, being aware of that situation, and there's a gaffe that's made and a mistake that's made. How does that leader deal with that most effectively?
Yeah. So this is one of the most critical things that I talk about, and I talk about it in the context of one of my frameworks, which is the reflexivity cycle. And as part of that cycle, you are becoming aware of your weaknesses and your strengths. You are evaluating yourself constantly, and you're making adjustments. And the most important part of this cycle is the adjustment phase. And so if you make a mistake, the most important thing for you to do as a leader to maintain your integrity and to be congruent with who you want to be as a leader is to fix that mistake.
Yeah.
And to do that authentically, to do it compassionately, and to do it in a way that teaches others that that is the right path. And quick example is, I messed up pronouns. I messed up somebody's pronouns, and they've told me numerous times that they use specific pronouns. And as a leader, I messed up, let's say in a big presentation,
Hmm.
and everyone on the team is upset with me. No one's saying anything to me, but everyone on the team is upset with me because I keep doing this. Then my thing as a leader is I then have to course correct. I have to recognize that interpersonal dynamic has been impacted by my behaviors, and I have to make adjustments. And so really, really simple and easy way to do this is to acknowledge I messed up. I didn't mean to. I'm still struggling with my unconscious bias when it comes to gender and understanding how people identify outside of that boundary. And as part of that, I want to acknowledge that I made this mistake. I did not do it intentionally, and that I am going to try to correct that in some way. And like just saying something like that sometimes can be enough. Sometimes it's not enough, but
Yeah.
sometimes it can be enough. But the most important thing that leaders can do is to course correct or to fix what has been broken.
Yeah. It's interesting, just hearing this the last few days is, it's some of us may know or want to say like, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And when you do that, then that is basically a unilateral or one person move. But then if you
Mhm.
ask that person who you're saying this to, or the group that you're saying it to, say, you know, will you forgive me or can you
Mhm.
forgive me? And then that brings that person back into where together you're talking about it as opposed to you did this
Mhm.
and I screwed up and now you have to fix it, but now together we can go forward. And I think that's an interesting piece and something that makes a lot of sense to me because, when you work with any communication, conversation, or a team, if you're
Mhm.
doing it together as a team, it's different than me telling you or me saying this and you taking that and so on. It's more of a team approach.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love it. And I think too, instead of will you forgive me, uh, an approach could be how can we fix this
Yeah.
together, right? I'm acknowledging I made a mistake. I am ready to make it right. I'm acknowledging that you as a group have been impacted by this dynamic, and I want to invite you into this. How do I change to make something better? And then what's going to be appropriate for you, because I may make a change and it might not heal the relationship. And so bringing people into that dynamic and asking them, how can we make it right? Or how can we fix it? Acknowledges both your part and then also bringing the team back into that conversation as well.
Yeah, and I see sometimes where people may think like, well, gosh, that's a lot of work and that takes a lot of time. And it's maybe a small minority in my company or my team. So is that is that worth taking that much time and effort, whatever. I see people struggle with that sometimes. And you know, uh, so how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I will say absolutely. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of energy. And I think the question is, what is the culture that you want to have in your organization? And if you want the culture to be a positive and inclusive dynamic where people feel like they can trust the leadership team and they can make mistakes and bounce back from those mistakes, a learning organization, then as a leader, you have to make time for those kinds of things. Now, of course, you can't always do it. And you may have to pick and choose like what are the big areas that I'm going to be able to model these behaviors in, and then how am I going to informally in my everyday interactions with my team make sure that I'm doing that. And so I will say, if you are trying to have a specific culture and that culture is in any way inclusive, building psychological safety, teaching individuals how to make mistakes and bounce back from them if they're looking for innovation or creativity or any of those kinds of things, then as leaders, we have to model those behaviors in our interactions, especially the big interactions where we've got all of our teammates together. Let's say we've got an offsite or something along those lines, then especially in those moments. And then if we're really struggling with our interpersonal dynamics in the informal interactions, then we have to make time to decide what are the most important ones over the course of the week where I did mess up, and how do I fix those?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So help us understand the difference between being and doing.
Yeah, such a good one. So much to say on this one, and I think I'm very spiritual, and I have been a doer for my entire life. I was in the army, and then from the army, I went into civil service, and I constantly excelled. I always wanted to do as much as I could because I thought I needed to do that to be successful. And the most important thing that I have learned, especially working with survivors and especially working with leadership teams, is that the most important thing that I can do is to actually just be there for someone. Sometimes you don't always have to have the right things to say. You just have to be willing to be there and to be in that moment. And I think as leaders, there's this unwritten rule or expectation that we have to have all of the answers or we have to do. And I think a big part of the work that I try to do with leaders now is teaching them how to be present. And especially knowing that they're not going to have all of the answers and they're going to be put in circumstances where they don't know how to respond, then they have to know how to pause, to kind of work through the mental chatter in their mind and to say, how do I respond in this moment in a way that is compassionate, that is authentic, and that's in alignment with the goals that I have. And the only way to do that is if you are centered in your presence and you are grounded in that moment. And in those circumstances, you are then able to navigate that complex interpersonal dynamic by saying something to the effect of, I don't know what to say right now. I don't know how to respond, but I want you to know that I am here for you. I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to take time to reflect on this, to journal, to seek consultation from whoever I need to seek consultation from, whatever it is that, whatever direction you want to take it, but you have to be grounded in that moment. And finding ways to just be sometimes, to find that stillness, to clear your mind so that you can make better decisions and you can engage interpersonally a little bit better, makes all the difference in the world.
So you're in the coaching world now. You're working with leaders of businesses and helping them improve their leadership skills. So what does your typical client look like? So if I'm looking for a coach, why do I hire you versus somebody else? What's your typical client?
Yeah. It's so interesting, especially now as I've become an independent consultant of the individuals who are interested in working with me. But most of the people that I work with are in larger companies. They have big teams and they are managing organizational change. And they're trying to navigate all of those complexities in terms of, the policies and the procedures and the team dynamics, the HR aspects, and they're kind of immersed in all of the chaos that it takes, I think, sometimes as a leader to navigate multiple departments. And so, definitely the vast majority of my experience is working with executive level leaders in larger organizations. But I have actually started working with individuals who want to learn and grow, and they're just starting out in their entrepreneurial careers and just leading smaller teams, 4 or 5 people, or sometimes up to 10 people. And so I think what is so important for leaders to know is it doesn't really matter how many people that you work with. These are basic skills that are translatable across all areas of leadership. And so while the work that I will do with you is going to be much more beneficial for people who are leading larger teams, if you're just starting out on that journey too, these are basic skills I think that are going to help you, especially if you want to grow and scale your business, for
Do you
sure.
think do you think that's the leaders that you work with, and I know it's a general question, but do you think they know that they're lacking in these areas, therefore I want to hire you for you to help me? Or do you
Yeah.
think that they hire a coach to generally improve, and then during that process they realize that they don't have the knowledge or the depth of
Yeah.
understanding they should?
Yeah, I will say it's definitely the latter.
Yeah.
Most people are not self-aware enough to understand what they're actually lacking, especially when it comes to complex things like their interpersonal development and their spirituality, equity-based concerns, and some of the more like nuanced topics that we get into. And I will also say that a lot of the individuals that I work with are not necessarily, I want to develop myself as a leader, but they come to me from rather from workshops or from educational sessions that I have provided at conferences and those kinds of things. Something goes off for them, and they realize, actually, I don't know enough about this, and I want to know more about it. And so I think when they come to me, most of the time they don't always know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And there's also the smaller number of people who hear about me from some workshop or some educational session and then decide they want to learn more about the topic.
Now, I've heard you say before that there's kind of three things that I've heard you describe in different ways than I've heard from other people. So you talk about reflexivity,
Mhm.
being intentional. That's more one I hear more often, and then just living in congruence. So
Mhm.
tell us what those three things mean to you and how you work that into your coaching.
Yeah. These are foundational aspects of the work that I do, and I think foundational for leaders as well. And when I talk about reflexivity, again, it's that cycle of self-awareness, self-evaluation, and self-adjustment. And these three areas, regardless of what you do, who you work with, or how many people you work with, this cycle is going to either make or break your leadership and your ability to grow and to scale. And I will say that as part of that, the two other concepts that I talk about, intentionality and congruence, are huge parts of this cycle. And so, in order to be congruent, and so in order to have our actions align with our values, then we have to be intentional about what we need to change and how we need to change it. And the only way to know what we need to change and how we need to change it is by going through this reflexivity cycle. And so recognizing what we need to work on, how we need to work on it, getting evaluative feedback from your own contemplative meditations, journaling, or anything else, or actually getting feedback from others. And once you have that feedback, actually taking action on it. And so a lot of times, especially in leadership development programs, they talk about reflection instead of reflexive leadership. And reflection is great, but it doesn't help you as a leader to know that you're weak in an area and to not take action on it. And so when we talk about reflexivity, the key difference there is taking action on what needs to have action. And so if as a leader, going back to the same example earlier, I make a mistake, then I have to acknowledge that I made that mistake. I have to recognize the impact that it has on other people. I have to get evaluative criteria from them. How can I make it better? Right? Is the evaluative criteria. What can I do? And then I have to actually take action on that. And so I have to acknowledge that I made the mistake, and I have to say, here's what I'm going to do to fix it. Then I have to do that. And if I do that, and it still isn't fixed, then I have to start that process over again. I have to go back to the drawing board to say, from my self-awareness standpoint, I still did not do what I needed to do appropriately. How can I do it better? Evaluating that and then trying again. And I think this is such an important part of, I mean, just basic life skills. Anytime you are struggling with anything in the world, this is kind of a very simple and basic cycle. But I think so many people do not follow through with getting that evaluative criteria and actually taking action on what needs to have action.
Yeah. And I I like what you're doing now, and you're helping leaders of companies, be aware of these things and improve and learn and grow and all this kind of stuff. It makes me think back of where we started, with your family, and you said you had four other siblings, I think, and
Mhm.
and uh, you know, I would assume there's a part, I mean, is there a part of you that wants to help them too and help them in that way? And are they receptive, or are they just they just have a different way to look at it than you do?
Yes. It is such an interesting dynamic.
Mm.
And families, they have a way of, being able to poke at you.
Yeah.
But I will say, yes, I have had many phases in my life where I have wanted them to learn and to grow. And unfortunately, almost all of them, one of them is better than the others, but the rest of them are not able to acknowledge
Yeah.
and not able to understand. And I think that prevents them from moving forward.
Sure. Sure. And then, we talked about all your disadvantages, I guess you might say, growing up. But you also had, you lost your dearest friend at age 17, which,
Mhm.
I'm sure was very traumatic and all part of this as well. And I think you actually had a head injury as well. Did you have a head injury while you're in the military, or was that something different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually had multiple head injuries, mostly from sports and it's extreme adventures. But
Yeah.
yeah, head injury, lots of things in my life for sure that have shaped me and helped me to understand how important these things are.
Yeah.
And I think kind of one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this is it took me ten years to unlearn some of the racist beliefs, some of the homophobic beliefs, and some of the like overly religious things that I believe to be true in the world. And knowing that I wanted to learn and I wanted to grow, and it still took me so long to be able to navigate that. And so, first and foremost, there has to be the willingness and the desire to learn and to grow. And if that's not there, then that's my first barrier. If someone is not in that place, then they're not ready to work with me because they are not ready to get into some of the concepts that need to be kind of pulled out for sure. But knowing that it takes so much time and so much energy and so much desire to learn and to grow is, I think, what makes me really passionate about this is I struggled a lot every day for a long time with many of the concepts that I talk about now. So I know how hard it is to be sitting in the audience and to say, I don't believe this to be true, or like, you're exaggerating that point, or this doesn't really happen. And so I think that's what makes me a little bit more relatable to some people, especially in the military. I had a lot of people who were able to hear what I had to say, specifically because I was able to acknowledge that it is hard and we do have to take those moments and to question ourselves and to question those beliefs, but that it can be done for sure.
Yeah. And it also makes me think too, I mean, we all have our childhood experiences and things that we've overcome and whatever. But you personally, do you feel like you've kind of been able to get out of it, and now you're here and things are going great, or are you always trying to get away from it?
Yeah. I'm very glad that you asked me this question because everyone has their beliefs that they hold to be true throughout their lives. And even when we tackle them and we work on them, there are always layers
Yeah.
to this. And I have my own coaching circles and my own community of people that I talk and I dive into, and I get deep in some of these areas, and I still struggle with accepting abundance in my life, whether it's financial abundance, whether it's like love and joy and prosperity. Like, I still struggle with that probably rooted in my early childhood beliefs that money is supposed to be hard and it's supposed to be difficult and you've got to work hard for it. You can't just sit back and make a lot of money for, you know, something that you only spent 2 hours on. Like, that's not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's so interesting, and especially now as I've been more successful and people are willing to pay me way more than I would ever think that something would be worth. Like, even in my own mind now, 25 years removed from that situation, I still struggle with that. And
Yeah.
I am very self-aware, and I'm very like I really want to dig into. I want to understand, like, what is this belief and how is this belief holding me back, and how do I let go of it as much as I can. But I still, especially in the success and abundance world, I have a lot of mind blocks when it comes to that.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to acknowledge there's always light and dark in every circumstance. And for me, I try really hard to always practice gratitude, especially when abundance is in my life right now in many different forms. And, you know, finding that balance between accepting and being grateful for some of the things that I have and how that plays out. But yeah, I definitely still struggle quite a bit in terms of some of the mind blocks that I've carried with me from childhood, for sure.
Well, I think in a world of material things and always wanting more and whatever, it seems a little different, but I understand exactly what you're saying, that it's almost like you feel guilty for having done well, or you feel guilty for, doing exceptionally well. And why is that? And you question it, but that's a different dynamic than always wanting more, more, more. It's never enough type of thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and for me that it's been lingering in my background for at least 15 years in terms of you know, I'm so financially stable that it bothers me because I know that even in my family and in my immediate circle, so many people are struggling.
yeah,
And, you know, I talk to people in my circles these days, and there's like no awareness that some people can't afford a computer or internet or some of these other things that we just totally take for granted today. And yeah, so it's definitely something that lingers, probably because my tie, I think, to my family in that regard, and how there is such a vast difference
yeah,
between where we're at. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a lifelong journey for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sure. So, Ang, in anticipation of our discussion today, is there anything I haven't asked you or we haven't covered that you want to be sure and get in the program today?
No, you know, I really loved getting to chat with you about this, and I liked your approach in the way that you kind of explore different topics, and I always enjoy it so much more when um yeah, it doesn't feel like I need to say or do anything in particular. And so I thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Oh, well, you're more than welcome. Well, at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. And that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Hmm. I would say that nothing is more important than how you engage with your team every single day. Those informal interactions that set the stage for what people think of you and how they think of you. Because that ripple effect of what you said and what you did is
Mhm.
what establishes the culture for that team. And so every day, be as intentional as you can about being congruent in your behaviors and actions in terms of what your values are, what your team's goals are, and what your overarching organization's desires are.
Yeah, well said. Well, Ang, this has been a real pleasure. I mean, your life story is incredible. I just think we can all learn from that and admire you for where you are compared to where you came from. I mean, it's a great story. So it's good
Mhm.
for us to learn from that. But also, you're doing good work with people, and I think that in this world, I think we can all agree that diversity is good, a diversity of opinion, diversity of ideas, diversity of backgrounds, all those kind of things. And then the other thing that I think about all the time too is this word belonging has really come forward a lot
Mm,
lately, and
mm,
and it's just human nature to want to belong to something, to want to be included in something, and so we all strive for that. So just poo-pooing that and saying it's not a big deal is going to get you nowhere. I think it's
mm.
definitely something we all have to be aware of and consider. So thanks for bringing that forward today, and
Yeah.
I really enjoyed our talk, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure people listening have learned as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, take care and have a good rest of your day, and maybe we'll meet down the road someday.
This sounds great. So wonderful to be with you today.
Thanks, Ang. Take care. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orange, the word, .coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.